want to begin for a few minutes by talking about the economy, the economic environment that we are now in, because there are suggestions that the economy could crater as much as 30% or more. We talked about this on Friday. Larry Kudlow, a little bit concerned about annualizing growth and so forth, because what some of the estimates are doing is taking a very negative second quarter and making that spread all throughout the year. I agree with Kudlow that that isn't the way to go, but the question is how long this will last in terms of the coronavirus economic shutdowns. And then with that in mind, how much of an economic impact could that have? The longer this goes, the longer it will take to recover. We could be seriously debilitating the economic recovery. And let's be clear about something, and that is that public health is critical, and that needs to be of significant import to all of our politicians, all of our elected officials. But at the same time, economic health is also public health. Now, we are hearing Anthony Fauci, Dr. Fauci, speaking his warnings and expressing his concerns about what's been happening across the country as far as trying to constrain this virus. In Cut 9, this is Dr. Fauci yesterday on CBS's Face the Nation, talking about how we are struggling to get this under control.
Despite the deaths that we may see, that mitigation is working and that you do have this outbreak under control?
I will not say we have it under control, Margaret. That would be a false statement. We are struggling to get it under control, and that's the issue that's at hand right now. The thing that's important is that what you see is increases in new cases, which then start to flatten out. But the end result of that, you don't see for days, if not weeks, down the pike. Because as the cases go down, then you get less hospitalizations, less intensive care, and less death. So even though you're getting a really improvement in that the number of new cases are starting to flatten, the deaths will lag by 1 or 2 weeks or more. So we need to be prepared that even though it's clear that mitigation is working, we're still going to see that tail off of deaths.
Dr. Anthony Fauci, I have touted him as somebody who I think is trustworthy on understanding what this virus is doing and some of the specifics needed to constrain it, to flatten the curve, and to stop the spread. I do believe that it is important to take these sorts of steps. So when we look at it and we view Fauci's role, I would have to say that this idea of fire Fauci, hashtag fire Fauci, was trending yesterday. I think that's nonsensical, especially at this point in time. He's one person that in very many ways gives a lot of reassurance to Americans, understandably so. He's been providing expertise. He's been doing YouTube interviews in all sorts of different venues on cable news and traditional media to break things down. You cannot remove Fauci, and I don't think you should. But at the same time, Fauci's views are not the only ones that should be listened to. We need to consider the holistic aspects of this crisis and all its various components. And one thing that I have noticed is that we are seeing some who are saying you have to just accept that this could go on for months. Virginia, the state of Virginia, for example, has their shutdown order, stay-at-home order in place through June 10th. Now, one thing that I have noticed is that the primary people who broadly accept and are pushing the notion of a long-term shutdown, not just April, maybe May, maybe June, maybe on out to September, one that can last months. As just the simple reality, those who accept that and advocate for that, as well as a policy that we should embrace, they're not merely basing their views on science. Rather, they tend to be more supportive of government's role in society and more of a believer that government has the capability to provide for those in need. Ergo, they're just fine with months of a shutdown because they think the government has the capacity to provide for the needs of the people. But also, as I've said before, it's important to keep in mind that politicians are politicians. They're always making their decisions based on what they think is the way to go, but they have to consider that, for example, policy decisions based on science are not just based on science. They're based on interpretations of the data and science, and those who are crafting those policies are the ones who are making decisions based on the science, and they are interpreting it and determining what are the best policies to do it. In other words, policies based on the science are only as good as those interpreting the science, those interpreting the data, and those who are crafting those policies, and only as good as they take into account all the factors. Insofar as containing the spread of this virus is the goal, these policies would be sensible and shut down out into perpetuity. But there are more factors to keep in mind. When shaping policy, policymakers must consider all the different aspects, including the economic aspect. Because the longer this goes on, we're seeing now Wall Street Journal reporting 29%. 29% of the American economy is at a standstill now. The longer that this goes on economically, the more difficult it is to recover quickly because the economy will be debilitated. Now, I'm not saying we should stop these policies now. I think April 30th seems like a reasonable enough time period with which to get things under control. The next week or two are going to be very difficult. We need to do what we can to flatten the curve, but at a certain point, we must recognize that at least scaling back some of these policies is going to be essential, because we cannot simply turn to the government and say that the government is able to do all of these things and just provide for the people out into perpetuity. Recognize the components of the economy are average, everyday people doing what they can, working hard, trying to provide for their families and their livelihoods. It's not just Wall Street, investors over on Wall Street. It's average, everyday people who are trying to make ends meet. Putting them in this position of relying upon the government for potentially months on end is untenable. And we must keep that in mind as policymakers look ahead at what to do next. April 30th, all well and good. That's fine. I understand it. But I do think that once we get into May, it may well be necessary to start opening things up for the American people, because we cannot go out into perpetuity and just think, oh, let's do months of a shutdown like this. It's just not tenable, and I don't have faith in government, Republican or Democrat, to provide for millions of Americans for months on. In cut 11, we have Ronald Reagan, who I think is one of the greatest presidents that this nation has ever had. Among the top few, top two, top three presidents, most likely, I would put Ronald Reagan in there. And he had his note about the 9 most terrifying words in the English language. Here's what he said they were.
I think you all know that I've always felt the 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
He had many truisms, and that's top among the truisms. Because while I understand that the government needs to take particular initiative here, in many cases, to slow the spread and flatten the curve, we need steps to be taken. At the same time, the idea that we can simply rely upon the government out for months on end to provide for our needs, to help us, is untenable. And I don't trust it. Again, fine with through April. But after we get past April, I think we've got to start opening up in smart ways, sure, but opening up our economy once again. Because we cannot look to the government who comes to us and says, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. Because those are terrifying words to hear. Because we cannot trust that the U.S. federal government is going to be able to take care of us let alone that they even should take care of us, because they should not. We are a society that is rooted in self-reliance, rooted in individual liberty, rooted in the idea of unleashing the unlimited potential of each and every individual. Right now, understandably, we're constrained, but the idea of a governor like Ralph Northam in Virginia saying, guess what, folks? We're having this order effective till June 10th, or other states considering maybe going out into September or what have you. That is not feasible, not tenable, and we should not be looking to that. The idea that the government can just help us is not one I believe, not one we should believe as Americans, particularly in the long term. We have what we've got now for this month of April. We need to heed Reagan's words moving forward. I want to hear it one more time, Nathan Matoush, please. One more time, play Ronald Reagan in the 1980s talking about the 9 most terrifying words.
I think you all know that I've always felt the 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
And then let's also heed his words in cut 12, what he had to say about what is the real problem.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem. It is time to reawaken this industrial giant, to get government back within its means, and to lighten our punitive tax burden. And these will be our first priorities, and on these principles there will be no compromise.
Once this crisis has abated, those are the words we should heed and be looking to unleash the unlimited potential of each and every individual in our private sector economy. Not looking to government, Republican, Democrat, whomever, to be the saviors, because that just can't happen. That is it.